Maria Santos looked like any other 19-year-old girl walking through the military base. She was small, barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, with long dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform hung loose on her thin frame, and she carried herself quietly, almost invisibly among the other soldiers. Most of the men barely noticed her as she passed by the training grounds each morning. The other recruits whispered about her behind her back. They wondered why she was even there. She never spoke up during briefings, never volunteered for dangerous missions, and seemed to fade into the background whenever the commanders were looking for volunteers. Some called her Ghost Girl because she moved so quietly through the base that people often didn't realize she was there until she spoke. Commander Rodriguez had been leading this unit for 12 years. He was a tough, experienced soldier who had seen combat in 3 different countries. His reputation was built on making quick decisions and never leaving a soldier behind. But even he had doubts about Maria. She had passed all her basic training, but she had never been tested in real combat. Her shooting scores were good, but nothing that stood out among the other soldiers. The base was located in a mountainous region where rebel forces had been causing trouble for months. Intelligence reports showed that enemy snipers were positioned in the hills surrounding the base, picking off soldiers who ventured too far from the protected areas. Several good men had already been lost to these hidden shooters, and morale was getting low. Maria spent her free time alone, often sitting on a small hill behind the barracks where she could see the entire valley below. She would bring a pair of old binoculars and watch the distant mountains for hours. The other soldiers thought she was just daydreaming or trying to avoid work duties. They had no idea that she was studying every rock, every tree, and every possible hiding spot where an enemy might position themselves. Her father had been a hunter back in their small village. From the age of 7, he had taught her to track animals through the forest, to remain perfectly still for hours, and to make impossible shots with an old hunting rifle. She could hit a rabbit at 300 yards, but she never talked about these skills with her fellow soldiers. She preferred to let them think she was just another scared recruit who didn't belong in the military. The truth was that Maria saw things others missed. She noticed when birds suddenly stopped singing in a particular area of the forest. She could spot the glint of sunlight reflecting off metal from miles away. Her eyes had been trained since childhood to pick up the smallest movements and changes in the landscape. These were skills that couldn't be taught in military school, but were learned through years of patience and practice in the wilderness. One evening, as she sat on her usual hill watching the mountains, she spotted something that made her blood run cold. There was a small flash of light from a rocky outcrop about 800 yards to the northwest. It happened again a few seconds later. Maria realized she was looking at the scope of a sniper rifle catching the last rays of sunlight. The enemy had positioned themselves perfectly to watch the main entrance of the base. She quickly made her way back to the command post, but found that Commander Rodriguez had already left for the day. The duty officer was a young lieutenant who barely looked up from his paperwork when Maria tried to report what she had seen. He told her that they already knew about enemy activity in the area and that she should stick to her assigned duties, instead of playing scout. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the sniper position she had spotted and how perfect it was for targeting anyone entering or leaving the base. She knew that tomorrow morning, when the supply convoy arrived, they would be sitting ducks for any shooter positioned in those rocks. The convoy was expected to bring medical supplies and ammunition that the base desperately needed. As dawn approached, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She quietly slipped out of the barracks and made her way to the armory. Using her access code, she checked out a standard military rifle and enough ammunition for a long mission. She left a note for her bunkmate saying she would be back before evening, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. The morning mist was still hanging in the valleys as Maria began her long climb toward the rocky outcrop she had spotted the day before. She moved slowly and carefully, using every piece of cover available. Her father had taught her that patience was more important than speed when hunting dangerous prey. She knew that if the enemy sniper spotted her coming, she would be dead before she could take a shot. As she got closer to the suspected position, Maria's training kicked in completely. Every step was calculated, every movement was deliberate. She had become the hunter rather than the hunted, and for the first time since joining the military, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The climb took Maria 3 hours of careful movement through rough terrain. She had to cross 2 streams and navigate around several cliff faces where one wrong step could send her tumbling hundreds of feet down the mountainside. Her hands were scraped and bleeding from gripping the rocky surfaces, but she pushed forward with determination that surprised even herself. When she finally reached a position about 200 yards from where she had seen the light reflection, Maria settled into a natural depression between 2 large boulders. From here, she had a clear view of the rocky outcrop while remaining completely hidden from anyone looking in her direction. She pulled out her binoculars and began the patient work of studying every inch of the suspected sniper nest. At first, she saw nothing unusual. The rocks looked empty and undisturbed. For a moment, she wondered if she had been wrong about what she had seen the night before. Maybe it had just been sunlight reflecting off a piece of quartz or some other natural mineral in the rock face. But her father had always told her that the best hunters were the ones who could wait longer than their prey. After an hour of watching, Maria spotted something that confirmed her worst fears. There was a small piece of camouflaged fabric hanging from one of the rocks, and it was moving slightly in the morning breeze. It was so well hidden that only someone looking from exactly the right angle could see it. She adjusted her binoculars and studied the area more carefully until she could make out the outline of a carefully constructed sniper hide. The enemy shooter had chosen his position perfectly. He was completely invisible from the base below, but had a clear line of sight to the main road where the supply convoy would be arriving. Maria checked her watch and realized that the convoy was due to arrive in less than 2 hours. She had to make a decision quickly. She could try to make her way back to the base to warn them, but that would take at least 2 hours of dangerous climbing, and by then it might be too late. She could try to radio for help, but she was too far away and the mountains blocked most radio signals. The only option left was to try to take out the enemy sniper herself, but that meant revealing her own position and engaging in a deadly game of cat and mouse with a trained killer. Maria had never killed another human being. All her hunting experience had been with animals, and even then she had always felt sad when she had to take a life. But she thought about her fellow soldiers back at the base, men and women who had families waiting for them at home. She thought about the supply convoy drivers who had no idea they were driving into a trap. The choice became clear. She carefully positioned her rifle and began the process of calculating the shot. The distance was approximately 250 yards, which was well within her capability. But she had to account for wind speed, the angle of the slope, and the fact that her target was partially hidden behind rocks. She would have to wait for the perfect moment when the enemy sniper exposed enough of himself to provide a clear target. The waiting was the hardest part. Maria lay perfectly still for over an hour, watching through her scope for any sign of movement from the sniper's position. Her body began to cramp from staying in the same position for so long, but she forced herself to ignore the discomfort. Her father had taught her that discomfort was just a feeling that could be pushed aside when something more important was at stake. Finally, she saw what she had been waiting for. The enemy sniper shifted position slightly, probably to get a better view of the road below. For just a few seconds, his head and shoulders were visible above the rocks that had been concealing him. Maria took a deep breath, let half of it out, and gently squeezed the trigger exactly as her father had taught her years ago. The shot echoed across the mountains like thunder. Through her scope, Maria saw the enemy sniper's body jerk and then go still. She had hit her target, but she couldn't tell if the shot had been fatal or if she had just wounded him. She kept her rifle trained on the position and waited to see if there would be any return fire. Minutes passed in complete silence. No shots came back in her direction, and there was no movement from the rocky outcrop where the enemy had been positioned. Maria began to think that her shot had been successful, but she knew she couldn't take any chances. She would have to stay in position until the supply convoy had safely passed and made it to the base. As she waited, Maria realized that everything had changed for her in that moment when she pulled the trigger. She was no longer the quiet girl who faded into the background. She had proven to herself that she could do what needed to be done when lives were at stake. But she also knew that taking a life, Even an enemy's life was something that would stay with her forever. The sound of truck engines in the distance told her that the supply convoy was approaching. She watched through her binoculars as 3 military trucks made their way along the winding mountain road toward the base. They passed directly through the area where the enemy sniper would have had perfect shots at them, but there were no gunshots, no explosions, no ambush. The convoy continued safely on its way to the base. After watching the convoy disappear safely into the base, Maria knew she had to investigate the enemy position to confirm what had happened. The climb across to the rocky outcrop was even more dangerous than her original ascent, requiring her to cross a narrow ridge with steep drops on both sides. Every step had to be perfectly placed, and she kept her rifle ready in case there were other enemy soldiers in the area. When she finally reached the sniper's nest, what she found both impressed and horrified her. The enemy soldier had constructed an incredibly sophisticated hiding place using natural rock formations and carefully placed camouflage materials. He had been there for days, possibly weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Empty food containers and a sleeping bag showed that this had been a long-term operation. The soldier himself was clearly dead. Maria's single shot had struck him in the head, killing him instantly. He was older than she had expected, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and weathered hands that spoke of years of military experience. Beside him lay a high-powered sniper rifle with an advanced scope that was far superior to the standard weapon Maria had been using. Going through his equipment, Maria found detailed maps of the base with guard positions marked, photographs of key personnel including Commander Rodriguez, and a notebook filled with observations about daily routines and supply deliveries. This had been a carefully planned assassination mission, not just a random attack. The enemy had been gathering intelligence for weeks, preparing to strike at the heart of the base's leadership. Most disturbing of all, she found a detailed schedule showing that the supply convoy was just the beginning. The plan was to eliminate the convoy first, then wait for the base commander to come out and investigate the attack. Commander Rodriguez would have been an easy target from this position, and his death would have thrown the entire base into chaos. Maria realized that her decision to act alone had prevented not just an attack on the supply convoy, but a coordinated assault that could have crippled the base's ability to defend itself. She gathered all the intelligence materials and began the long journey back down the mountain. The return trip was faster but more dangerous, as she was exhausted from the physical and emotional strain of the morning's events. By the time she reached the base, word had already spread about the safe arrival of the supply convoy. Nobody seemed to notice that she had been gone, and she was able to slip back into the barracks without drawing attention. She cleaned her rifle and returned it to the armory, then sat on her bunk trying to process what had happened. The problem was that she had acted without orders and without informing her superiors. Military protocol demanded that she report to her commanding officer immediately, but she was afraid of the consequences of admitting that she had left the base without permission and engaged in combat operations on her own initiative. She spent the rest of the day wrestling with what to do. That evening, as she sat in the mess hall picking at her dinner, Maria overheard 2 soldiers talking about strange sounds they had heard from the mountains that morning. They mentioned hearing a single rifle shot echoing across the valley, but had assumed it was just hunters in the area. The conversation confirmed that nobody at the base had any idea what had really happened. Later that night, Maria made her decision. She knocked on the door of Commander Rodriguez's office and asked to speak with him privately. The commander was surprised to see her, as she had never requested a private meeting before. He invited her in and offered her a chair, noting that she looked unusually serious and tired. Maria took a deep breath and began to tell her story. She started with spotting the reflection in the enemy sniper's scope the night before, continued through her unauthorized mission that morning, and concluded by placing the captured intelligence materials on the commander's desk. She spoke clearly and honestly, leaving out no details and accepting full responsibility for her actions. Commander Rodriguez listened in complete silence, his expression growing more serious with each part of Maria's account. When she finished speaking, he picked up the intelligence materials and studied them carefully. The maps, photographs, and operational plans painted a clear picture of how close the base had come to a devastating attack. After several minutes of examining the evidence, the commander looked up at Maria with a mixture of amazement and concern. He told her that what she had done was both remarkable and completely against military regulations. Her actions had undoubtedly saved lives and prevented a major security breach, but she had also violated direct orders and put herself in extreme danger without backup or support. The commander informed Maria that he would have to report the incident to higher authorities and that there would likely be an official investigation. Her unauthorized action, regardless of its successful outcome, could result in serious disciplinary measures including court-martial. But he also acknowledged that her quick thinking and courage had prevented what could have been a catastrophic attack on the base. As Maria left the commander's office that night, she felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. She had done what she believed was right, and she had proven to herself that she was capable of much more than anyone had imagined. But she also knew that her actions would have consequences, and she wasn't sure what the future would hold. The next morning brought unexpected developments that would change Maria's life forever. Commander Rodriguez called an emergency briefing for all personnel, something that rarely happened unless there was an immediate threat to the base. Maria sat in the back row of the briefing room, trying to remain invisible while her heart pounded with nervous energy. The commander began by announcing that intelligence had been received about planned enemy operations against the base. He held up the materials that Maria had recovered, explaining that they revealed a sophisticated plot to eliminate key personnel and disrupt supply operations. What surprised Maria was that he made no mention of how this intelligence had been obtained or who was responsible for gathering it. After the briefing, several soldiers approached Maria with questions. Word had somehow spread that she had been involved in the previous day's events, though the details remained unclear. Some of the men who had previously ignored her now looked at her with curiosity and a new kind of respect. Others seemed skeptical that the quiet girl they barely noticed could have been involved in anything so dramatic. Later that afternoon, Maria was summoned to meet with a colonel she had never seen before. Colonel Martinez had arrived from regional headquarters to investigate the incident and interview all personnel involved. He was a stern man with silver hair and intense eyes that seemed to see right through her when she entered his temporary office. The colonel's questions were thorough and professional. He wanted to know every detail about her background, her training, and her decision-making process during the unauthorized mission. Maria answered honestly, explaining about her father's hunting lessons and her observations of the enemy position. She could tell that the colonel was both impressed and concerned by her unconventional skills. What Maria didn't know was that Colonel Martinez was actually a specialist in identifying and recruiting soldiers with unique abilities. He had been sent not just to investigate the security breach, but to evaluate whether Maria represented a valuable asset that could be better utilized by the military. Her combination of natural talent and proven courage under pressure was exactly what his Special Operations Unit had been looking for. During their conversation, the colonel asked Maria to demonstrate her marksmanship skills at the base shooting range. Word spread quickly about the impromptu test, and soon dozens of soldiers had gathered to watch. Maria felt uncomfortable with all the attention, but she knew she had no choice but to comply with the colonel's request. The shooting demonstration began with standard targets at typical military distances. Maria's shots were accurate, but not spectacular, exactly what would be expected from a competent soldier. But then the colonel began requesting more challenging shots at longer distances and smaller targets. This was where Maria's true abilities began to show. At 400 yards, she consistently hit targets that other soldiers struggled with at half that distance. At 600 yards, she was still placing shots in the center ring while most of the watching soldiers couldn't even see the targets clearly. The colonel pushed the test even further, setting up targets at 800 yards in challenging wind conditions. The crowd of watching soldiers grew silent as Maria took her time studying the wind patterns and calculating her shot. She made subtle adjustments to her scope, controlled her breathing exactly as her father had taught her, and squeezed the trigger with perfect smoothness. The distant target showed a clear hit in the center ring, and several soldiers actually applauded. But the most impressive demonstration came when the colonel set up multiple targets at different distances and asked Maria to engage them in rapid succession. This required her to quickly adjust her aim and account for different ballistic calculations with each shot. Most trained snipers would need several minutes to make such adjustments, but Maria moved between targets with fluid precision. Commander Rodriguez watched the entire demonstration with growing amazement. He realized that he had been completely wrong about Maria's abilities and potential. She wasn't just a competent soldier. She was a natural marksman with skills that were extremely rare in the military. He began to understand why she had been so confident about taking on the enemy sniper alone. After the shooting demonstration, Colonel Martinez asked to speak with Maria privately again. This time, his tone was different, more respectful and interested rather than investigative. He explained that soldiers with her particular combination of skills were desperately needed for special operations that regular infantry couldn't handle. The colonel offered Maria a choice that would determine the direction of her entire military career. She could remain with her current unit and face disciplinary action for her unauthorized mission, or she could volunteer for transfer to an elite reconnaissance unit where her abilities would be properly trained and utilized. The work would be more dangerous, but it would also be more important and better suited to her unique talents. Maria asked for time to consider the offer, but deep down, she already knew what her answer would be. For the first time since joining the military, she felt like someone understood what she was capable of achieving. The prospect of using her skills for missions that really mattered was both exciting and terrifying. That evening, as she sat on her usual hill overlooking the valley, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 days. She had gone from being an invisible, underestimated recruit to being offered a place in one of the military's most elite units. The quiet girl who had tried to fade into the background had proven that sometimes the most unlikely people were capable of extraordinary things. 3 months later, Maria found herself in a completely different world. The elite reconnaissance unit's training facility was located in a remote mountain complex where soldiers learned skills that went far beyond basic military training. Here, she was surrounded by some of the most skilled fighters in the entire military, each one selected for specific talents that made them valuable for special operations. The training was unlike anything she had experienced before. Instead of mass formations and standard procedures, everything was focused on individual skills and small team tactics. Maria learned advanced camouflage techniques, silent movement through hostile territory, and communication methods that allowed teams to coordinate without revealing their positions to enemy forces. But the most important part of her training involved working with Commander Rodriguez, who had also been transferred to the unit as part of a new program to integrate field commanders with specialized reconnaissance teams. This was where Maria's story would take its most dramatic turn, though neither of them knew it at the time. The commander had initially been skeptical about working closely with someone so young and inexperienced in conventional military operations, but as they trained together, he began to appreciate Maria's unique perspective and abilities. She could spot threats and opportunities that he missed, while he provided the tactical knowledge and leadership experience that she lacked. Their first real mission together came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value enemy leader was meeting with local rebel commanders in a village about 50 miles from their base. The mission was to observe the meeting, gather intelligence about future operations, and, if possible, eliminate the enemy leader before he could escape back to his stronghold. The infiltration required a 3-day journey through hostile territory, where enemy patrols were actively searching for government forces. Maria and Commander Rodriguez would have to travel light, avoid all contact with enemy forces, and position themselves for a shot that might be their only opportunity to complete the mission successfully. The journey tested every skill that Maria had learned during her intensive training. They moved only at night, sleeping in carefully concealed positions during daylight hours. Maria's ability to spot enemy patrols before they became a threat proved invaluable, allowing them to avoid several potentially dangerous encounters during their approach to the target area. On the morning of the 3rd day, they reached a ridge overlooking the village where the meeting was supposed to take place. The position gave them a clear view of the main building where intelligence suggested the enemy leader would be staying. But it was over 1,200 yards away, an extremely challenging shot even for an expert marksman. Maria studied the target area through her scope while Commander Rodriguez coordinated with headquarters via encrypted radio. The village appeared quiet, with only a few civilians moving about their normal daily routines. But Maria's trained eyes picked up details that indicated the presence of hidden security forces protecting their high-value target. She pointed out guard positions to the commander, noting subtle signs like unusual movement patterns in areas where civilians seemed to be avoiding. Her ability to read the landscape and spot concealed threats gave them a much better understanding of what they were facing than the intelligence reports had provided. As the day progressed, vehicles began arriving at the village. Maria watched through her scope as armed men took positions around the main building and established security perimeters. The meeting was definitely taking place as intelligence had predicted, but the level of security was much higher than expected. Late in the afternoon, a convoy of 3 armored vehicles arrived at the village. Through her scope, Maria watched as the enemy leader emerged from the second vehicle. She had studied photographs of him during mission preparation, and there was no doubt about his identity. This was their target, and she would have only one opportunity to take the shot. The distance was at the extreme range of her abilities, and there were several factors that made the shot incredibly difficult. Wind conditions were variable, there were heat waves rising from the valley floor that distorted her view, and the target would only be exposed for a few seconds as he moved from his vehicle to the building. Commander Rodriguez gave Maria the final authorization to take the shot when the opportunity presented itself. She settled into her firing position and began the careful process of calculating all the variables that would affect her bullet's trajectory. Everything she had learned from her father, combined with months of intensive military training, came together in this crucial moment. Through her scope, Maria watched the enemy leader emerge from his vehicle and begin walking toward the building. She tracked his movement, waiting for the perfect moment when he would be in the clear without any obstacles between them. The shot had to be perfect because there would be no second chance. Just as she was about to squeeze the trigger, something unexpected happened that would test both her skills and her partnership with Commander Rodriguez in ways neither of them had anticipated. In the split second before Maria could take her shot, her peripheral vision caught something that made her blood freeze. A glint of reflected sunlight from a rocky outcrop about 300 yards to their left revealed the presence of an enemy counter-sniper team. They had been so focused on their target in the village that they had missed the fact that they were also being hunted. Maria immediately shifted her aim away from the village and toward the enemy sniper position. Through her scope, she could see a camouflaged rifle barrel pointing directly at Commander Rodriguez, who was still focused on coordinating the mission via radio. The enemy sniper was preparing to take a shot that would kill the commander in seconds. Without hesitation, Maria made a decision that went against everything in the mission plan. Instead of eliminating their primary target, she fired at the enemy sniper position. Her bullet struck the enemy marksman just as he was about to pull his own trigger, saving Commander Rodriguez's life but alerting every enemy soldier in the area to their presence. The moment her shot echoed across the valley, chaos erupted in the village below. Enemy soldiers began searching for the source of the gunfire, while their high-value target was quickly hustled into the safety of the main building. The mission to eliminate the enemy leader had failed, but Commander Rodriguez was alive because of Maria's quick thinking and perfect marksmanship. Commander Rodriguez immediately understood what had happened when he saw Maria's rifle pointing away from their original target. He realized that she had spotted a threat that he had completely missed and had made the difficult choice to prioritize his safety over completing their assigned mission. It was a decision that showed incredible maturity and tactical awareness. Now they faced a new challenge. Their position was compromised, and enemy forces were actively searching for them. They had to extract from the area quickly while avoiding patrols that were converging on their location from multiple directions. Maria's ability to spot enemy movements before they became visible to normal observation would be crucial for their survival. The extraction took 18 hours of careful movement through terrain that was swarming with enemy soldiers. Maria guided them around patrol routes and through concealed paths that kept them invisible to their pursuers. Her skills in reading the landscape and predicting enemy behavior proved just as valuable for survival as they had been for completing their original mission. During their escape, Commander Rodriguez began to understand the full extent of Maria's abilities. She wasn't just an exceptional marksman. She was a complete reconnaissance specialist with instincts that had been sharpened by years of hunting in wilderness conditions. Her decision to save his life instead of completing the mission showed that she understood the bigger picture of what they were trying to accomplish. When they finally reached safe territory, Commander Rodriguez submitted a detailed report that would become legendary within the special operations community. He described Maria's actions as the perfect example of tactical flexibility and selfless courage under extreme pressure. Her willingness to sacrifice mission success to save a teammate's life embodied the highest ideals of military service. The failed mission actually enhanced Maria's reputation rather than damaging it. Military leaders recognized that her ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances and make life or death decisions in split seconds was exactly what they needed for future operations. She had proven that she could be trusted with the most dangerous and important missions. 6 months later, Maria was promoted to sergeant and given her own team of reconnaissance specialists to lead. She had gone from being an overlooked recruit to becoming one of the military's most valued assets in less than a year. Her story became part of the training curriculum used to teach other soldiers about the importance of situational awareness and quick decision-making. Commander Rodriguez continued to work closely with Maria's team, and their partnership became a model for how experienced leaders could mentor and develop soldiers with exceptional abilities. He never forgot that he owed his life to the quiet girl who had once seemed so unremarkable that most people barely noticed her presence. Years later, when Maria had become a decorated veteran with dozens of successful missions, people would ask her about the moment that changed her life. She would always say that it wasn't when she saved the commander's life, but rather when she first decided to trust her instincts and take action instead of waiting for someone else to solve the problem. Maria's story became an inspiration for other soldiers who felt underestimated or overlooked by their superiors. It proved that exceptional abilities could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the quietest people were capable of the most extraordinary actions when the situation demanded it. Her legacy was not just her remarkable marksmanship skills, but her demonstration that courage and quick thinking could overcome any obstacle when applied at the right moment.